Danielle Hamilton, welcome back. What's going on?
Nothing. I'm so happy to be here, Jimmy. Thanks for having me.
And no, I said welcome back because the people watching don't realize, but we've already done this already once. We had a wonderful conversation as of the recording of this yesterday, and Jimmy forgot to hit record. So I do this all over again. We're the next day. I kind of know your philosophy now, but thank you for being here. You guys, Dani Hamilton is her name. Danielle Hamilton Health over on Instagram. Go check her out. Be there, be square. Go follow her. Put a lot of really great information up. And even as of today, you put up a post about PCOS. We're definitely going to get into PCOS here in a second. But you've just got an amazing story. And I definitely want you to share kind of the groundwork for why you're into blood sugar now. And it has a lot to do with your own personal history.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that got me really into blood sugar is that I had blood sugar issues probably my whole life, but didn't know about it. And they were really driving a lot of illness and sickness and dis-ease in my life. And it was kind of uncovering that really helped me make the biggest changes. So, back when I was young, I ate a standard American diet like anyone else. I loved my cereal.
Back when you were, aren't you still young?
Okay, when I was a kid. Would eat cereal, yogurt, granola bars, any kind of breakfast food, you name it. Breakfast for dinner was my jam, AKA all processed carbs all the time.
What was your favorite to eat?
My favorite was I just was a cereal-aholic.
Yeah, what cereal?
Golden Grams
Uh,
and
Poop, Crunch, and all those kind of like specialty like ones. They would do like a Scooby-Doo blend of something. It was always the same processed grain sugar and yeah.
Yeah, that healthy, heart healthy, stuff. You'll read like the heart healthy stuff on the packages and you're like, "Oh, I'm being healthy." And my mom, bless her heart, wanted me to be healthier, and she noticed that I always kind of had a little bit of excess fat on my body, and she was always wanting the best for me and wanting me, not to struggle with being overweight or, be bullied or anything. And so she told me to have the healthier cereals like Special K and Basic 4, and I had to have all the granola bars, and my brother was getting Reese's in his lunch, but I had to have the quote healthier stuff. And it's not much healthier. So I grew up as a pretty, I would say, like sickly kid, not overly sickly, but I mean, constantly getting colds and ear infections and strep throat. And what does that mean? It means tons and tons of antibiotics. I had eczema when I was little. I got my tonsils out when I was 18 because I had strep throat like 6 times in a year. I just wasn't getting better. I was having some antibiotic resistance to amoxicillin, and I got my tonsils out. And then the next year, I got really bad seasonal allergies. I was having 5 allergy shots at a time. I was developing new allergies as I was getting the shots. I had asthma. I had a rescue inhaler. I had Advair. I had Singulair. I had Zyrtec. I mean, tons of like pills. I would wake up and I felt like that commercial where the elephant was sitting on your chest. I felt like that was me. I couldn't take a breath in. And it was just so crazy because that didn't happen until I was like 18.
Was it all because you had your tonsils taken out? What's on the tonsils that would make that happen?
So the tonsils are they're part of your immune system, and they kind of will tag different, incoming invaders, or even just like, oh, this is tree pollen, like, cool, now we know what it is. But without that, it's kind of like my immune system went more haywire than it had already been. Plus, I had just started college, and it was like more drinking, even worse eating than I had been. And so the combination of probably what was an extremely leaky gut, lots of inflammation, plus the tonsils out just set the stage for my immune system to be completely shot. Also, probably adrenal dysfunction as well. That's really, really something that's indicated when we have allergies, that's also going on in the background. So I had all these allergies and asthma. I was getting chronic sinus infections. And one day I was just so exhausted and so tired from all these allergy medications. I'm sure if you've ever taken them, they make you super drowsy, and the sinus infections make you so tired. And I just burst into tears. I'm like, I can't take this anymore. I can't live like this. And so I happened to read the book, The Paleo Solution by Rob Wolf, and my whole life changed. And I adopted a paleo diet. I did like a Whole30.
Does Rob know that, by the way? Have you ever talked to Rob Wolf?
No, I haven't.
I have got to connect you to Rob Wolf. He's been a good friend of mine for a long time.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Hear that. And as an author myself, whenever you hear people say, I read your book and it changed my life, I mean, it's just, there's nothing more humbling.
Yeah, I agree. I have people saying that about my podcast, and I feel so grateful. I'm like, I'm just starting out. I can't believe that. So it's really nice to hear. So yeah, Rob's book changed my life, and everything he was saying, like I was working at a nursing home at the time, and everything he was saying about how the standard American diet affects you and all the chronic diseases that you get, I was looking at it every day when I saw my patients. I'd have to do these chart reviews, and I would write all their diagnoses. And it was a list, a page long of diagnoses and 2 pages long of all the pharmaceutical drugs that they were on. And I'm like, this can't be real life. This can't be inevitable. Like, what about when, back when we were cavemen, we didn't have this. We didn't have glasses. We didn't have braces. We didn't have allergy medications. Like, was everyone fine back then? And I mean, then you bring up things like Weston Price, which you learn, and how he, found out that all these things that in our modern diet are really just making us so sick. So
a dentist he was a dentist.
Yes.
And in the medical health field, a dentist figured out the nutrition component.
Yeah, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, I'll just go into it quickly for some of your listeners who aren't familiar, but in the late 1800s, early 1900s, he was this dentist who noticed that throughout his career, people's teeth and their health were getting worse. And so by the end of his career, everyone had like crowding and cavities, and their arches were more narrowed, their facial structure was more narrowed. And he's like, what the hell is causing this? And so he had the fortune of time and money and privilege to go around and study all these remote groups of humans all over the globe. And he noticed that they were essentially free of health and disease, free of disease, and had this robust health. And he said that they were handsome people with wide arches and beautifully straight teeth. And there were these women who could have like 16 babies in a row and not have any cavities. And apparently when you have a child, it takes a lot of your nutrient stores out of you. And so that's why the recommendation is to wait 18 months between children. But they were just their diets had so many nutrients and so many fat soluble vitamins that they were able to have children without having any health issues because of it. And then he saw that as soon as a person in any one of these remote groups would be introduced to what he called the foods of commerce. So these are like modern foods like sugar and flour. The very next generation would have smaller, more narrow dental arches. They'd have crowding. They were less good looking. It's wild. I mean, the health of the people just immediately changed in the very next generation. And so it's like, that's why we see this rise of, chronic health issues now, because it's all catching up to us. And so it's pretty wild to have seen that firsthand in the nursing home. And then I started working with kids. I saw it with kids with autism and how just chronic disease is really plaguing us. And so getting back to real food helped me effortlessly reverse my allergies, reverse my asthma. I never had a sinus infection again. I never got strep throat again. I just feel robustly healthy, But unfortunately, in 2013, I went through a breakup. I was coming out. I had a lot of different, major stressors, life stressors. And my health started to go downhill again, despite eating this nutrient-dense whole foods diet. And I started to have a lot of hormonal symptoms. So I lost my period. I was having really bad acne, like worse than I've ever had it before. I was gaining weight out of nowhere, and I was extremely tired and fatigued. I'd sleep all morning. I was achy in the morning, and I was like, what the hell is going on? So my first instinct was to paleo harder, like whatever that means. Usually it's like, oh, this was working once, so let me try harder. And unfortunately, that wasn't the answer. Of course, what you're putting in needs to change if you want a different result. And so I struggled for a while, and I found out that I had PCOS based on an internet search. And then I went to a gynecologist and I was like, listen, doc, like I'm really struggling. I can't lose weight. I'm so upset about this. Like, I don't know what to do. And he's like, well, you have to lose weight. You have to take the pill and there's no cure. I was like, seriously, dude? And this is what women and, I'm sure men too, but women mostly, we are met with, gynecologists and saying that it's all in our head and that it must be psychosomatic. We have, what are you going to say?
Going to say it's not just polycystic ovarian syndrome. I mean, it's literally across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we get a type 2 diabetes diagnosis. I was just writing about this just today.
Mm-hmm.
Inevitability that you're just going to have to take these drugs and not going to have to be put on insulin for the rest of your life. There's no hope given. And so here you are as a patient presenting symptoms of PCOS, and you're basically saying, yeah, you ain't got no hope. And it's like, what?
Yeah, it's like your only hope is a pharmaceutical that's just going to mask the symptoms, and that's it. And I see so many women message me like every single day. Oh my goodness, my doctor told me to take the pill. My doctor gave me metformin, but it made me throw up. Like he doesn't have any more answers for me. And it's because their only tool is a prescription pad. And a disease of diet and lifestyle cannot be reversed with a prescription. It can only be reversed with diet and lifestyle.
Well done. That's the quote. That's going to be the quote of the podcast. That was very
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So I knew that I had to obviously take matters into my own hands, be my own healer, and I was, ready for it, but I was really struggling. A lot of the information that is out there for PCOS is like, oh, do this to help you lower your testosterone, because PCOS, you usually have elevated androgens, which is elevated testosterone, and, lower progesterone. So there's a lot of talk about these female and male sex hormones that are out of balance. And they'll say like, oh, some women have depression who have PCOS. Some women have insulin resistance. And I didn't know at the time anything about, blood sugar. That wasn't in my radar. I would honestly skip over that information because I'm like, oh, I don't have diabetes, not important to me. And so I was trying to address my sex hormones and not really getting anywhere. I ended up going on 2 prescription medications. I did go on metformin and spironolactone for my acne, and those things kind of helped. But it's funny because they kind of mimicked what my diet down the road would do. So the metformin kind of mimicked this like ketogenic diet by lowering the amount of sugar that my body is absorbing or whatever, and lowering the blood sugar. And then the spironolactone kind of acted like a water pill. And we know that when we drop carbohydrates, we also will drop some of that water that we're holding on to. So again, like I said, I was on these pills, but I was like, this isn't who I am. Like, I don't want to be on a prescription medication. I know that I want to find the root cause, but I just couldn't find it. And so I was listening to your podcast with Dr. Fung and Megan Ramos, the Fasting Talk podcast, and Megan said something that, again, changed my life. She said, PCOS is the diabetes of the ovaries. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, really? Like, what do you mean? And so I started to look into that, and I realized that at the root of PCOS is blood sugar imbalances, specifically insulin resistance and inflammation. And so I think the narrative for most people in the PCOS world is backwards. So it's not that some people with PCOS have insulin resistance. It's the reverse. Some people with insulin resistance have PCOS. And if we look at it from, insulin resistance and inflammation are the root cause, I can address those. I can reverse those. I can make those better. And then I got rid of my PCOS. So,
and this is the thing about insulin resistance. It's the major underlying cause of every chronic disease. So people like to say, I have heart disease, I have type 2 diabetes, I have PCOS, I have Alzheimer's disease, all these diseases. They're all insulin resistance. And like, we can't like really address any of them until we address the elephant in the room. And that is insulin resistance. And I even envision someday, Danielle, that we're going to have these medical clinics that will be insulin resistance medical clinics. And you come in, you've got chest pain. All right, you've got the manifestation of insulin resistance. It's hard to see. So here's the cardiologist that will help deal with that. But everybody's working on the same page of the same thing to heal the insulin resistance. It's just manifesting in all these different ways.
Absolutely. I love that. And I would love to be a part of that clinic and help people, because that was something that was really important for reversing my PCOS. So I ended up taking my paleo diet and just modifying it to a paleo keto diet. And I took out some foods that you don't think that, foods in a paleo diet. I know we talked about this yesterday, that you want to tell your story about being in the paleo world.
Just say what went wrong with paleo, because we were told it's the perfect human diet. It's real food, and you can't possibly hurt yourself eating real food. I'm talking mockingly, because I was told when I was in the paleo world. I was the token low carb guy in paleo for many years, and they would always tell me, oh, you don't need to eat low carb. We're not low carb. We're not keto. I'm like, okay, you're not, but there is a segment on that spectrum of paleo that do need to be more low carb, ketogenic. And so what happened? What foods in the paleo template weren't working for Dani?
Yeah, so the foods that were most affecting me would be all of those paleo carbs. I was really dependent on fruits. I would say that I'm like a fruitarian. I would have fruits probably every single meal, maybe sometimes as snacks. I'd have smoothies. I'd have acai bowls, and then I'd have the starchy veggies like plantains and sweet potatoes and butternut squash. And I think some of the mindset coming from the standard American diet, where it's like a meat, a vegetable, and a starch, that sort of transferred over to paleo. So for me, it was like a meat, a vegetable, and again, a starch, and maybe fruit, and some honey in my coffee. And if you look in paleo cookbooks, you'll see everything has, add this many tablespoons of honey, add this, coconut sugar, have this, dates, dates, and maple syrup. And it's like, at the end of the day, sugar is sugar is sugar. And so I didn't think about looking at carbohydrates. I was like, okay, I can get behind not thinking about calories, right? But I wasn't thinking about carbohydrates because I didn't know I had a problem with them. And as soon as I took them out, oh my gosh, huge changes.
And what's funny is they used to have this saying, oh, we eat more plant matter than a vegetarian. Like they were all the plant matter. And it's not to say that non-starchy vegetables and green leafy vegetables or anything, or even some of the lower sugar fruits are a bad thing for most people. And even those people that have a little more insulin sensitivity, maybe you can have a potato, or maybe you can have a little bit of carbohydrates, starchy carbohydrates. But the point is, they were bragging about that rather than focus on, okay, can you handle it because you're insulin sensitive versus resistant? And if you're insulin resistant, it's a whole new set of rules. It's almost like in nutrition, we want to apply one monolithic way of looking at nutrition and apply it to everybody, when everybody is not the same.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that I got from the Nutritional Therapy Association is bio-individuality. And I talk about it in every podcast episode of mine. My listeners are probably tired of me saying it, but it's so true. And that's why when I coach people, I'm like, I can't just give you a keto meal plan. It doesn't work like that. And I think that it kind of brings me into another topic that is something that is very close to my heart, that this idea that sometimes people just change their macros and expect everything to change and everything to get better. And I'm making a new program soon called More Than Macros, because there's so much more than just changing your macronutrient ratio. That's one big piece. Like, congratulations, good job. That's hard to do. Not everyone can do that. But we need to look at digestion. We need to look at hydration. How much stomach acid do you have? How's your liver doing? Like, there's so many, where's your mind at? How's your sleep? There's so many things that go beyond it.
One of the most toxic things that came into the keto community was when the whole movement of if it fits your macros started. So people would like have these macronutrient ratios. And even when I first started experimenting with ketogenic diets back in 2012, I was talking about this on my blog. I was doing these active experiments that later turned into Keto Clarity. I was doing all these experiments, and I was doing what was working for me, kind of the macros. People started mimicking the exact macros I was doing. Wow, this is so hard. You don't have to mimic me, like, out. And I think this whole, I have to get 5 more grams of fat to fit my macros, or I can have M&Ms as long as it fits my macro. It's like, it's all these like notions that people want to bring into keto that have nothing to do with keto.
Right. I find that people are trying to get away with essentially not changing, and they're trying to force what they have done into this box and be like, oh, I'm doing something different. And it's like, but are you really? And I feel like there's a lot of resistance to change. And this kind of, I was ranting yesterday because I saw this page about PCOS, and everyone is totally entitled to whatever opinion they have. And if something works for someone, I'm not here to knock it. But I'm going to say, for my approach, for what I have seen help a lot of women, it's not this approach that's being talked about a lot, which is this like, there's no good food or bad food. Any food can be a food for PCOS. And it's like, okay, well, if you don't want to try to reverse your PCOS, you can have anything you want. But if you want to try to reverse it, I'm sorry, I personally don't think that an ice cream cone and a cookie is a great choice. And I think that people are there's some people in these camps of people who are so afraid to be like, oh, that's a limiting diet. You're restricting yourself. It's like, well, you know what? I ate like crap for years, and now I need to restrict because my body needs to get rid of some things so it can heal. I don't think that it's such a big deal to cut things down for a period of time and earn your way back to having some different foods, some more variety, maybe some fruits or some, sweet potato. So for me, I was really restrictive at first because I needed to do a lot of healing. And now I find I can, have some berries and have a piece of mango in the summer. And guess what? I'm in ketosis the next day. I feel good. I'm not gaining weight. So you earn your way back to more flexibility, but it's a healing protocol. It's a healing protocol.
Oh, an influencer friend of mine on Instagram the other day, Keto in Canada, Joanne. I love her to death. Great job. But she put on for the first time one of those CGMs, glucose monitor, which, by the way, I was on your podcast, Unlock the Sugar Shackles podcast. Go check it out, you guys, on wherever you listen to podcasts. But she put one on. I was wearing one the day we did our interview, and she put it on, and she's like, I want to try all kind of experiments. And I'm like, you go, girl. And she a big bowl of fruit. She had a whole banana. She had like a whole apple and like a bunch of strawberries, and she ate it all in one sitting. And of course, she showed the CGM. She's sitting there, flash monitoring it. It moved. Her blood sugar barely went up, maybe 10 points. And then within 2 hours, it was back to baseline. And she's like, what the heck? I said, that's called insulin sensitivity, my dear. Congratulations.
Congratulations, you have it, right?
Exactly. I think some people get so caught up in, okay, this is what I've done on keto, so therefore it's what I always have to do. And you don't realize if you come in with the insulin resistance manifesting as PCOS for you, manifesting as obesity for me, then when you reverse it, you're able to handle those carbs even better. And it's a beautiful thing. She then got cocky and said, oh, I'm going to eat some chicken nuggets now from McDonald's. And it went way up.
Wow. That's funny. That's interesting.
Quality, real food-based carbohydrates once you're insulin sensitive. And then once you're insulin sensitive, you can still have messed up blood sugar response even to junk food.
Yeah, that's so interesting and so intriguing how it's so different for everybody. And until everyone puts on a CGM, we're not going to know. I have one coming to me, hopefully from Sweden. A friend of mine is sending me one. So I'm hoping to get my hands on one. But yeah, so the other thing about the naysayers for keto, which is kind of along these lines, is that they say, don't do it, it's too restrictive. And like as if keto is what you're going to have to, like keto macros is going to have to be your macronutrient ratio for the rest of your life. And
Some
it's
people,
like,
though, that's the thing. Some people,
right.
I go keto, or even let's go even more draconian and extreme. I go carnivore. You mean I have to only eat meat the rest of my life? And
Yeah.
imagine that because of that, over a very short period of time, in the grand scheme of things, it enables you to bring foods back in.
Yeah. And so I look at this as like, okay, we're going to restrict for now, but what are we going to gain from it? We're going to gain insulin sensitivity and metabolic flexibility. And so, for example, my wife did keto with me sometime last year, and she did it for a little while, but she ended up going a little bit more paleo. She felt better with a little bit more carbs, but she'll, intermittent fast time to time. And so yesterday she fasted and then had a keto macro type lunch. And I was like, let's test your ketones before dinner. Let's just see where you're at, because she has not, quote unquote, eaten keto for probably a year now. And wouldn't you know, her ketones were 0.7. She was in ketosis because she doesn't need to eat keto ratios all the time, because she has developed that metabolic flexibility and will only eat like essentially paleo carbs and some white rice. So it works for her.
This is such an important point you're bringing out here, Dani. So thank you for this. Keto, people think, is a diet. No, keto, being in nutritional ketosis, being in ketogenesis, is a metabolic state.
Yes.
So whatever it takes to get you into that metabolic state of ketosis, it's going to vary from someone who's highly insulin resistant, 400 plus pounds, out of control blood sugars, versus someone who's maybe a lot more metabolically insulin sensitive, maybe athletic, got some, energy. They go to the gym a lot, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Those two diets are not going to be the same, but both have a similar metabolic response when they do the things to produce ketones in their body. This is the thing that just, white rice is not keto. Okay, not for you, but someone with more insulin sensitivity, it could be. So this good food, bad food, kind of going back to the PCOS forum we're talking about, I kind of get that mentality. The problem is when you put it out there, I eat white rice on my keto diet. And I go, okay, that's a dangerous message to put out there without the context of what you mean. Okay, very insulin sensitive, you consume it, you wear a CGM, you see it goes up, goes down, and everything's fine. Not everybody's going to have that response. And this has been I've been doing this 15 plus years, that I've noticed over the years. One person makes one big proclamation about something in nutrition, and then it's suddenly applicable to everybody. When I was in the paleo world, there was one female blogger who said, I did intermittent fasting, and it messed up my metabolism. And I'm going, and then everybody started believing, women can't fast. Why? Because that blogger said it. And I'm going, wait a minute. One person wrote about it does not mean it applies to everybody. This is, I've long said, you've got to do your own experimentation on yourself, which is why I love CGMs. I wear a Oura ring to test my cheers to test my sleep and see how that's going. It's like we have to stop relying on kind of, especially anecdotal kind of stories. And I would even say, stop relying on what you read about in a study, because the study only applies to those people that were in the study. Your study, the N equals 1. I'm on a rant here in Jimmy Rant Studio. You're the N equals 1 that needs to figure out what's going to work for you.
100%. That's what I tell people in my podcast. I'm like, don't listen to me. I tried this. You can feel free to try it, but get your own information from your own experiment. And I love that you do your N equals 1 all the time. And I do the same. It's like you have to have this biohacking mentality, because you can't just follow something blindly and expect it to work. You need to try something and see what happens. And even people who, let's say, quote unquote, like they're like, I can't stay strict, I fall off. and, I eat something bad and go to McDonald's, I was like, well, how do you feel after? Oh, I feel terrible and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, write that down. Make a video like I just ate McDonald's and I feel horrible. Like keep that information in mind so it can help guide you the next time. And of course, there's much more, there's food addictions and imbalanced blood sugar that's driving people to make decisions. So it's not as simple as that. I'm not trying to simplify it, but I'm saying that for some people, it's like, don't look at it as like, oh, I messed up, so I may as well just, compound the mistake and just eat whatever I want now. It's like, no, get back on track and use that information to help guide you. That's part of the experiment and it's what's driving you and it will help you make better decisions in the long run. So if I go to a party and I eat cake and I feel horrible for 2 days, I'm like, wow, I really don't want to eat cake. So then the next time I'm presented with cake, it's not a mental battle like, oh, should I have a little piece? Oh, maybe I can have some. What if I just do this? What if I have, apple cider vinegar before? It's like, oh, I don't want that because
Right.
I know what's going to happen. So,
Well, I'll give you an example. I eat mostly kind of a carnivore diet right now. And I thought, okay, last year I had difficulty when I ate chicken. So, in fact, it was the week I was on your podcast. I was still wearing the CGM. I thought, let's do this experiment where I eat a pound of chicken breast.
yeah.
Just what happens to my blood sugar. Now, on a carnivore diet, chicken's perfectly fine. You try to get a little more fatty cuts, but I wanted to push the envelope a little bit. Let's see what the protein would do. And of course, people worry about gluconeogenesis. I think that's less the issue than what I'm about to share here. And we talked about this when we recorded yesterday, but I wanted to bring it into this way. I ate that, Danielle, and within like 30 minutes, it had gone up 5 points, which you would expect. Eating food does do that. 5 points is negligible. But then it fell like a rock about 15 points from baseline. And I started feeling all the feelings of hypoglycemia. I got extremely hungry. I got extremely tired. I was over here on the couch over there, just like sprawled out, just get me through this. And I was only going to go for 2 hours, but at 2 hours, it was still falling. I'm like, I'm going to see how far down it goes. It finally got down as low as 69. And then it slowly started working its way back up 2 hours and 30 minutes after I ate.
Wow.
That was a weird response. And what we talked about when we recorded yesterday, and now it's lost, but we're going to bring it back. Insulin does its job. When you consume a meal that's got, calories and energy and all that, it helps to manage your blood sugar. And of course, when it's devoid of carbohydrates, like the all protein one that I ate, if insulin works too much, it could actually push you down into hypoglycemia. And I definitely want to hear your thoughts on the hypoglycemia here in a minute. But what happened is it goes down, but there is an opposite hormone from insulin called glucagon. Nobody ever talks about glucagon because that's the one that helps bring it back up. Because again, your body's trying to tightly regulate your blood sugar. Insulin does its job unless you're insulin resistant. But I wonder, you can heal insulin resistance. You may have this thing called glucagon resistance. And I would love to see more research done in this arena. I've been trying to put it on the radar screen of a lot of researchers I know. We need to see what's the mechanism as to why people are getting these hypos and getting all those symptoms, even eating no carbs.
Yeah, so I did look this up and I did see that there's some it's not an autoimmune issue. I think it's a genetic issue where some people can't release glucagon. They can create it in the liver and they can't release it. So is that you? And that your liver swells up? Oh, wow. Yeah. So I did see something about that, but I do also think that sometimes that the glucagon runs out. And this is an issue in hypoglycemia where when I had PCOS and I didn't know I had blood sugar issues, I got some fasting blood work done. And I always hated fasting because I would feel so horrible. I would be shaky and like trembling, dizzy, lightheaded. I'd be like irritable and I felt really weak. And no surprise, of course, my blood sugar was 60 and I had no metabolic flexibility. So I think by that point, the glucagon also runs out. And now what's happening is my blood sugar is dropping. And then what has to happen is your adrenals have to come in and step in and create, epinephrine and all these other things to, in an emergency, raise your blood sugar. And that is what we call like a very metabolically expensive process.
Yeah.
And so we use a lot of nutrients to do that. And that might be why some people wake up with like a beating heart. Their heart is pounding. That happens a lot because our adrenals needed to step in to save our lives, so our blood sugar didn't go so low. So that is something that a lot of people definitely experience.
Man, and it's another reason you get very weak and very tired suddenly as well. People are like, wow, I'm so tired. The funniest part is I had a pound of chicken.
Yeah.
And within 45 minutes, I was starving.
Wow.
Like I could do over there on that couch to not go eat the whole refrigerator out. That's how hungry I was. And I had just had a big plate. Like there was the hunkinest plate of chicken you've ever seen in your life. And I was trying to prove a point of I could eat a lot of food. It wasn't the energy, it was what the energy was. Now that doesn't mean protein's bad for you, but it was, as we were talking about earlier, it was knowledge for me, just like the birthday cake that you said. It was knowledge for me that if I'm going to have chicken, I don't eat it in high quantities by itself, and or I make sure I get enough fat in there to offset some of that. I will tell you, when that experiment was over, I went into the kitchen and I made me some eggs cooked in some butter, slathered it in a lot of fat.
Yeah.
And within 15 minutes of eating the eggs, I felt fine.
Yeah, exactly.
So literally my body telling me, okay, dummy, we appreciate the amino acids, but we really needed some fat in there.
Right. Yeah. The body can't store excess amino acids, so it's going to convert them into glucose. And then it's going to cause this sharper rise if it's not accompanied by fat to slow down the absorption. And yeah, so that's kind of what's going on there. But the other thing I wanted to say is that it's really common that when you're having this blood sugar crash, that you're getting this intense hunger signal from your body. And a lot of times this looks like a craving for a high carbohydrate or sugar food because your blood sugar is going low and your body's like, hey, get some sugar stat, or else, bad things are going to happen. And so a lot of people are really stuck in that kind of blood sugar roller coaster where they're getting these dips and then it's causing the craving. So if you can get the dips out of there, which is the benefit of wearing those CGMs, and even just testing your blood sugar if that's all you have, making sure you don't go too low. Like that's the other piece, is you want to make sure that it's not going so far below baseline, because that would indicate that you had too much of an insulin response. And it could be most of the time because the absorption of the glucose was too fast. So when you slow it down, you slow the glucose response and you slow the insulin response, and it won't pump out so much and store away so much of the blood sugar.
I hate those people who say, well, when you crave carbs, you need to feed your body those carbs because it's obvious your body's trying to tell you that you need carbs. And my experience personally, and talking to a lot of people, is a lot of times when you get those carb cravings where you think you're supposed to have carbs, vis-a-vis your body saying, we got a low blood sugar, you need to bring it back up, go eat carbs, and it's sending you the stick. It's actually starving for fat and energy. Because if you're deficient in energy, or if you ate a high protein thing like I did with my experiment and you didn't get enough fat, it's really looking, and nutrients is the final thing. So energy, fat, nutrients is what it's actually missing, and not the carbohydrate. It's just the body knows that carbohydrate's the most expedient way to raise your blood sugar. So that's why you think you want those carbs. Right. So it's something I try to teach people a lot. When you get carb cravings, don't reach for carbs, reach for fat primarily. And so I usually say get like a little piece of block cheese and put some butter on it and stick it in your pie hole. And within a few minutes, that craving magically, Dani, goes away.
Yeah, it's really powerful what changing your macronutrients can do. And, it's not to say that, of course, that's going to fix everything, but it really is such a great place to start. And it could be so powerful when you get those ratios right. All of a sudden your hunger goes away. All of a sudden you don't have cravings. And I think that is the food freedom that so many people are really looking for when they say they don't want to be on a diet. They don't want to be restricted. I have never felt more food freedom than this diet. and quote unquote diet in the way I'm eating now, because my blood sugar is balanced. I'm not addicted to processed foods because I don't eat them. And so when I have a hunger signal, it's actual hunger and it's for nutrient dense food. Yesterday, I had chicken for breakfast, and I don't think I had enough fat with it. So I just wasn't feeling that great. I was working all through the afternoon. I didn't really eat. And I'm like, I need to go buy a steak. And that's what my body was wanting. It was wanting steak with ghee all over it. And I felt so good. I didn't need that much. And I was nourished. And I can listen to my body because I know the signals it's giving me are not due to addiction of processed food. They're not due to a blood sugar dip. They're due to actual physiological needs. And so I think that these people who want to do this intuitive eating and all this stuff, they have the right intention, but their bodies aren't ready for it yet. And I do think that they would, a lot of people would benefit from doing some of the work to clear out those processed foods, undo those addictions that they have to sugar and processed foods, balance their blood sugar, and then they can know what they want to eat.
I think intuitive eating works once you're fat adapted, because once your body is used to feeling a certain way, like you said, you're more in tune with your hunger, you more know real cravings and what they actually mean and everything. I would love to see researchers kind of get into this subject as well, that when you are craving a certain food, how do you know that craving is actually what it is that you're thinking about? I wonder of what we think about is a memory of something that made us feel good when we ate it, more so than what we're actually craving. It really, like, I'd love a psychologist to be involved with a research team while they're actually physically feeding people foods, and then making them go a period of time without food, then to see what they're thinking about versus what they actually want or need.
True. And I'm also thinking, as you're saying that, about our gut bacteria and how much that is really in charge of our decisions. Like, I heard that we're 12-to-1 bacterial cells to human cells. So it's something like that. We are way more bacteria than human. And so that's another part of it too. So if we are switching over our gut flora by eating nutrient dense whole foods, low carbohydrate, non-processed foods, then our gut bacteria are also going to be asking for those healthier foods and not this garbage. So sometimes people, like, I have a client now and she comes to mind when I talk about this. She did 30 days paleo. She's feeling so great, but her sugar cravings are coming back in because she's not there yet. You need much more than 30 days as well. Like, people want to do these crash diets, and you need a long time because change happens slowly. Our bodies are fighting to stay in homeostasis. And so we need to be persistent and keep sending it these messages like, you are safe, it's okay. And that's the way the body makes these slow changes that are going to add up to lead you towards optimal health.
By the way, my bacteria I call Fabios, so they're 12 times more strong than Jimmy's. So, where do people mess up on keto? Because not everybody does well on keto. And if you don't do well on keto, how do you help your clients deal with blood sugar dysregulation?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people mess up in a variety of areas. Number one, they expect it to work too quickly. So they are like, oh, I felt really bad. I had a headache and I had low energy and I didn't feel well on keto. And I was like, well, how long did you do it? 1 week. I'm like, well, that was the keto flu. Those are the sugar withdrawals. And so, of course, giving something enough time to work. That would be number one. Another thing I see are people trying to do like, well, if it fits my macros, they're still kind of taking these ideas of, using processed foods or a lot of artificial sweeteners again, I can't do artificial sweeteners. They trick my body. They wake up my sugar dragon. I say, like, I have the sugar dragon. It is asleep and hibernating when I do keto. As soon as I have an artificial sweetener, a little bit of it, my sugar dragon's like, I smell sugar. And then it's like, get sugar, get sugar, get sugar. So I can't do that. It also messes with your gut bacteria as well. And so that's not something that works for me. And I'm sure other people, the sweeteners, the good, bad, and the ugly. Oh, from the Keto Cure book. Yeah, very good. Exactly. So I'm not into the sweeteners, so I think that people really overdo them because they're just trying to ketoify what they've always eaten. So not coming to it from a real food approach, I think is harder. So I always tell my clients, step 1, paleo, step 2, paleo keto. And and then customizing. So a lot of people rely on dairy. A lot of people are having bacon and sausage at all these different meals and cold cuts. Some people are still fat phobic. I see, and so they're not adding enough fat. Some people are relying on apps too much and they're like, oh, I need to have this ratio of this. And it's like, well, that would be a good place to start. Or maybe those macros were designed for someone with epilepsy, but you need a little bit more protein. You need, you can do a few more carbs. I see so many women being like, well, I'm tired of eating meat and cheese. I'm like, who said that that was keto? Like, I don't know. There must be some like visual that's been, pushed in everyone's mind, and this is keto. My keto involves a lot of green vegetables and a lot of veggies. It has lessened over time, but I kind of go back and forth with what makes me feel good. But you can have a lot of green vegetables and they're not going to kick you out of ketosis. I know there's the whole carnivore camp with, not having vegetables, not having fiber.
Well,
But
and that's what's convoluting the whole conversation is
yeah.
people are seeing all these voices talking. So they see
Hmm.
someone like my Real Talk co-host, Dr. Will Cole, wrote a book called Ketotarian, which is a mostly plant-based kind of ketogenic diet, and he includes some eggs and fish, but mostly plants. And then you've got people like Dr. Paul,
Sean Baker.
who's talking
Yeah.
all the different parts of the animal. Then you've got people like Sean Baker saying only eat ribeye steaks. And so it's like at some point people get all of this information and they think they need to regurgitate all of it in their own life. And that's impossible. As
Right.
someone who's been in this space 15 years, I have seen it all. I
Yeah.
have heard it all. It's like eat sauerkraut, don't eat sauerkraut, eat legumes, don't eat legumes, eat meat. Don't. I've seen it all.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you figure out what works for you.
Yeah. And that's where we're circling back to that bio-individuality and self-experimentation, because that's what it boils down to. And so it's like, know who to listen to in terms of what to try, but I don't follow Jimmy Moore's diet because we're very different and that's not going to work for me. I don't follow someone else's diet because I need to just learn to customize it to myself. So you get little things, you add, you modify, you take away, you experiment, and honestly, it's really fun.
So let's get into insulin resistance because you do help your clients reverse their PCOS, women clients.
Mhm.
Hope
Yes.
there's no guys with PCOS.
No.
If there are, we have other issues to talk about. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So talk about how do you kind of walk through, I guess, first explaining that PCOS is insulin resistance and that because it's a manifestation, what do you do with them? How do you determine that they have it? And then where do you go?
So I don't, as an NTP, we don't diagnose anything. So someone might come to me saying like, I have undiagnosed PCOS, or I have PCOS, but they'll also, from learning information from what I put out on my Instagram page, they'll be like, I also have blood sugar issues. And so the awesome thing is that women are coming to me being like, I have blood sugar issues. I'm like, I'm so glad that you know what those look like enough to say that, yeah, you do. And so what we do as an NTP is just really work on figuring out those root causes and then just providing some balance to help balance everything out. And so if we look at insulin resistance, usually on a chart of someone who has insulin resistance, as an NTP, we use these things called nutritional assessment questionnaires, and you get to see how their stomach acid is, how their liver and gallbladder is functioning, mineral status, blood sugar, all this stuff. And the left side of the chart are really the foundations or the root causes. And so we just start there. And then on the right side of the chart are all things that we would call the consequences. So those are like adrenal hormones, thyroid, sex hormones, cardiovascular, immune. Those are all consequences of not having these root causes, these foundations in check. And so the cool part is we just focus what we're addressing to that left side of the chart and everything starts to come down. So that is something that is really awesome and helpful, because I used to be like, oh, I have this symptom, take a supplement for this. I have this symptom, like try this. And so now we're looking at what are the root causes. And it usually comes down to, of course, blood sugar. So we're going to lower the carbohydrates, get rid of those toxic inflammatory vegetable oils, make sure we're eating a real food, properly prepared, nutrient dense diet. And we're going to look at stress and sleep and things like that, all those things that help blood sugar. Then we're going to look at the person's hydration, and usually digestion is messed up, and that's a source of inflammation. And so inflammation is this other piece of PCOS. And so when we start to tackle the digestion, then the nutrients are getting in more, which we need nutrients for optimal blood sugar regulation. You know, we need chromium and zinc and B vitamins and all those things. And so now the person's getting more nutrients because they're absorbing them better. The foods aren't inflaming them as much. And so you just see this overall drop in inflammation. And then we add in the proper balance of fats and also some minerals. So a lot of people are deficient in magnesium. They're deficient in like these nutrients that blood sugar dysregulation kind of uses up, like the chromium, zinc, and B vitamins. And then we look at the balance of fats, because that's really important, making sure that they have the right balance of fats, because fats end up going down these pathways to become inflammatory or anti-inflammatory prostaglandins. And we need a good balance of both, because of course, you know that our immune system's job is to inflame, but we also need to be able to anti-inflame. And so when we see those in balance, everything just kind of works out, and it's amazing.
And people don't know this too, in the keto space. One fat that we like to eat actually is purposely inflammatory, and that's saturated fat. The burning of inflammation that does positive things in the body. So don't let that scare you. If you ever hear people say saturated fat is inflammatory, yes, it's inflammatory with a good reason.
Yeah. And people are afraid of that. They're like, oh, it causes me to inflame. And there was a story that one of my professors told me in nutrition school, that someone was overdoing like the fish oil supplements so much that they kind of lost the ability to inflame, and it was really negatively impacting their immune system. And so we have this thing as humans where we think if something is good, more must be better. And it's not really ever like that.
Or is that name's Jimmy Moore? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool once you kind of get everything into balance, and it just kind of heals itself. It's really magical.
When did you become a nutritional therapist?
The January 2018.
Oh, nice. So a little while. I know that they now call themselves what?
FNTPs.
Functional nutritional therapy practitioners.
Yeah, I got grandfathered into that because I do the functional evaluation as well, which is the coolest thing I've ever had an opportunity to do and learn and watch. I was like, this feels like witchcraft. So it's
weird the first time, and then they like hit my little rib cage over here, and I jumped a mile. They're like, okay, you got an issue with your pancreas or digestion, and I'm going, wait, you push, hurt. You have translation of what that means. So yeah, it's pretty magical. People that aren't familiar with nutritional therapy, go look up nutritional therapy. Was it .com or nutritional therapy?
Nutritionaltherapyassociation.com. Yeah.
Interested in that, but before I let you go, tell us about your podcast. Why did you start a podcast? You obviously are very adept behind the microphone. You've got a beautiful microphone there. That's the
thank you.
For my podcast. But tell us why you decided to do a podcast.
Yeah, so the reason I decided to do a podcast is because whenever someone asks me a question, my answer is always so long, because there's always caveats when it comes to nutrition. And I feel like I just need to explain myself. And I have always wanted to be a teacher in some way, shape, or form. And I love just sharing information that I learn, because it so drastically changes my life. I find it to be so fascinating. And to be able to have that opportunity just to, honestly, it's really to just get it off my chest so I can tell whoever wants to listen. And I rant a lot as well, so I can definitely relate. And I recorded myself ranting something in the car yesterday. That's going to be a podcast coming up. But But I really love to just share information and kind of break down some of these like sciencey terms in an easy to understand way. Like insulin resistance is a tricky topic to understand, and it's thrown out there, and I feel like people don't get it. And so I also I'm currently working full time as a speech language pathologist, and so as in my my full-time job, which I'm working my way out of, is I have had to, for my career, break down different subjects and make it really easy to understand for children who have very limited capacity to understand. And so I feel like I try to do that same thing with difficult topics in nutrition and just make it really like actionable so they could take this information and use it. And I kind of am that like middleman.
You don't realize it, but you just described me 10 years ago.
Well,
And
thanks.
got that brain and that want to of translating things that are difficult to understand into easy to understand language. You've got books in your future. You've got speaking opportunities. I'm so happy to know you now. I'll say I'll know you when, or when, because you're really going places, and anything I can do to obviously help you, please know that I'm a friend and would be delighted to assist you. But wow, yeah, you're definitely doing some really great work. The name of that podcast, Unlock the Sugar Shackles. So go check that out, you guys. But again, Danielle Hamilton Health over on Instagram. Go follow her. She needs more than 4,700 followers. We're going to get you over 5,000. I hope so.
Thank you. That's my goal. Well, my
Yeah,
goal is 10K. I just want to swipe up. That's all I want.
pretty darn cool. You see, I use it all the time in my stories.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jimmy. That really means so much coming from you. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.